The idea had seemed brilliant at the time, a Christmas road trip to rekindle the old traditions. Every year, Sarah and her younger brother Liam would pile into their parents' car and make the long, snowy journey to their grandparents' remote cabin nestled deep in the forest. This year, however, was different. It was their first Christmas without their parents, who had tragically passed away in a car accident the previous winter. Sarah and Liam thought the trip might help them find solace in familiar memories. The siblings packed their old station wagon with gifts, blankets, and enough snacks to last the 200-mile journey. Snow was already falling lightly as they left the city, casting an idyllic, wintry glow over the roads. But as they drove farther from civilization, the radio lost its signal, and the festive music that had once filled the car faded into static. "It's fine," Sarah said, turning the radio off. "We'll just talk. Like old times." Liam nodded, though his eyes lingered on the darkening sky. "It's coming down faster now. Maybe we should have waited until tomorrow." "Grandma's expecting us," Sarah replied, her voice firm. "Besides, we've driven in snow before." Hours passed, and the snowstorm thickened. The narrow forest road they had turned onto was barely visible under the accumulating snow. Tall pines loomed on either side, their branches heavy and sagging, creating an almost suffocating tunnel. "Are we lost?" Liam asked, his voice tinged with unease. "No," Sarah said, though she wasn't entirely sure. The GPS had stopped working miles back, its screen stuck on the dreaded "searching for signal" message. Still, the road seemed familiar enough. She pressed on, her knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel. Suddenly, the headlights caught something in the distance, a figure standing in the middle of the road. Sarah slammed on the brakes, and the car skidded to a halt. The figure didn't move. It was a man, dressed in old-fashioned clothing, a long black coat, a wide-brimmed hat, and boots caked with snow. He stood perfectly still, his face obscured by shadow. "What the hell is he doing out here?" Liam whispered. Sarah honked the horn, but the man didn't flinch. Unease prickled up her spine. "I'm going to drive around him," she said, her voice shaky. As she eased the car forward, the man stepped to the side, allowing them to pass. Liam turned to look back as they drove away. "He's still standing there," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Don't look," Sarah snapped. "Just don't." The encounter left a palpable tension in the car. They drove in silence, the storm growing fiercer by the minute. Snow piled up on the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it, and the road was now barely discernible from the forest floor. "I think we should turn back," Liam said. "This isn't safe." Before Sarah could respond, the car's headlights illuminated another figure ahead. This one was different, a woman in a white dress, her hair loose and cascading over her shoulders. She stood barefoot in the snow, her pale skin glowing eerily in the dim light. "What is going on?" Sarah muttered, her heart pounding. She slowed the car again, but this time, the figure moved. The woman turned and began walking into the woods, her movements unnaturally smooth, almost gliding. "We're leaving," Sarah said, her voice breaking. She pressed the accelerator, but the tires spun uselessly. The car was stuck. Liam's breathing quickened. "What do we do?" Sarah tried to calm herself, gripping the wheel tightly. "We'll dig the tires out. It'll be fine." They bundled up and stepped out into the freezing night. The wind howled through the trees, and the snow stung their faces. Sarah grabbed a small shovel from the trunk and began clearing the snow from around the tires while Liam stood guard, his eyes scanning the forest. "Sarah," he said after a moment, his voice trembling. "She's back." Sarah turned to see the woman standing at the edge of the woods, her head tilted unnaturally to the side. Behind her, other figures began to emerge from the shadows, men, women, and children, all dressed in outdated clothing, their faces pale and expressionless. "Get in the car," Sarah hissed. They scrambled back inside, locking the doors. The figures moved closer, their footsteps soundless in the snow. Sarah turned the key in the ignition, but the car sputtered and died. "No, no, no," she whispered, frantically trying again. The figures were now surrounding the car, their faces pressed against the windows. Their eyes were empty, black voids that seemed to suck the light from the car's interior. Liam screamed as one of them began clawing at the glass, its fingers long and skeletal. The woman in the white dress appeared at Sarah's window, her lips curling into a grotesque smile. "What do you want?" Sarah shouted, tears streaming down her face. The woman's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Instead, the figures began to fade, dissolving into the storm like smoke. Within seconds they were gone, leaving only their footprints in the snow. The car roared to life on Sarah's next attempt, and she didn't hesitate. She floored the accelerator, the tires finding traction at last. They sped down the road, not daring to look back. When they finally reached the cabin, they bolted inside, locking every door and window. The firewood stacked by the hearth was dry, and they quickly lit a fire, its warmth doing little to dispel the chill that had settled deep in their bones. "What were they?" Liam whispered, his voice barely audible over the crackling flames. Sarah shook her head. "I don't know. And I don't want to know." They didn't sleep that night. Outside, the storm raged on, and every creak of the cabin made them jump. In the morning, when the storm finally subsided, they found no trace of the figures. The footprints in the snow had vanished, as if the night's horrors had been nothing more than a nightmare. But as they prepared to leave the cabin days later, they found something chilling waiting for them. Tucked under the windshield wiper of their car was a single, frost-covered Christmas card. Inside, written in elegant, looping handwriting, were the words, "See you next year." It was supposed to be a fun weekend getaway. Four college friends, Megan, Tyler, Lisa, and Jake, had planned a road trip to a remote cabin in the woods to escape the stress of finals. They'd packed their SUV with snacks, sleeping bags, and enough supplies for a 3-day retreat. The GPS estimated a 6-hour drive, most of it on Highway 66, a long stretch of road cutting through barren desert and rolling hills. The sun was setting as they merged onto the highway, casting the landscape in hues of orange and purple. Megan was driving, Lisa sat in the passenger seat, and the boys were sprawled out in the back. The mood was light, the music loud, and laughter filled the car as they reminisced about old times. "This place is supposed to be amazing," Lisa said, scrolling through pictures of the cabin on her phone. "Rustic but modern. And no neighbors for miles. Perfect for a horror movie," Jake joked, leaning forward. "A group of friends isolated in the woods, what could go wrong?" "Don't jinx it," Megan replied, smirking. "The only thing we're going to be scared of is how bad Tyler snores." The group burst into laughter, but as the miles ticked by and the sun dipped below the horizon, the jovial mood began to wane. The highway seemed endless, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through an increasingly desolate landscape. The GPS showed no upcoming turns, just a straight line stretching into nothingness. "How far now?" Tyler asked, yawning. 2 more hours, Megan replied, glancing at the GPS. The screen flickered briefly, but she dismissed it as a glitch. "We'll be there before midnight." They drove on in relative silence, the car's headlights cutting through the darkness. The occasional roadside signs, weathered and rusted, were the only indication that anyone had ever traveled this road. "I need to pee," Lisa announced. "You'll have to hold it," Megan said. "There hasn't been a gas station for miles." "Wait," Jake said, pointing ahead. "What about that?" A flickering neon sign appeared in the distance, advertising a diner and gas station. The building was old and rundown, its paint peeling and windows coated in grime. A single gas pump stood in front, and a weathered pickup truck was parked nearby. "Better than nothing," Lisa said. Megan pulled into the lot and parked near the entrance. Inside, the diner was dimly lit and eerily quiet. A lone waitress stood behind the counter, her uniform faded and her expression blank. She didn't greet them as they entered. A jukebox in the corner played a scratchy tune that seemed out of place. "I'll just be a minute," Lisa said, heading for the restroom. Megan and the others took a seat at one of the cracked vinyl booths. The waitress approached, her movements slow and deliberate. "What can I get you?" she asked, her voice monotone. "Just coffee," Megan said, glancing at her friends. They nodded in agreement. As the waitress shuffled away, Jake leaned in. "This place is creepy as hell." "It's just old," Tyler said, though his tone lacked conviction. "Places like this are all over," Lisa returned, looking pale. "Let's go," she said quietly. "Now." "What? Why?" Megan asked. "Just trust me. Let's get out of here." The group exchanged uneasy glances but didn't argue. They left cash on the table and hurried back to the car. As they drove away, Megan glanced in the rearview mirror. The waitress stood in the doorway, watching them, her face illuminated by the flickering neon sign. Back on the highway, the tension in the car was palpable. "What happened?" Tyler finally asked Lisa. "I don't know," she admitted. I had this feeling, like something was wrong. Like we weren't supposed to be there." "Great," Jake muttered. "Now we're all freaked out." The road stretched on, unchanging. Megan checked the GPS again, but the screen was blank. She tapped it, but nothing happened. "That's weird," she said. "It's never done that before." "Just keep going," Lisa said. "We'll find it." An hour passed, then another. The road showed no signs of ending. The group grew increasingly uneasy. Tyler tried his phone, but there was no signal. Even the radio emitted only static. "This doesn't make sense," Megan said, her voice shaky. "We should have reached the turnoff by now." "Maybe we missed it?" Jake suggested. "No," Megan insisted. "I've been paying attention. There hasn't been a single turn." "Look," Lisa said, pointing. "Up ahead." In the distance, the diner's flickering neon sign came into view. The group fell silent as they realized it was the same diner they had stopped at earlier. "How is that possible?" Tyler asked. "We've been driving straight for hours." "Maybe it's a different one," Jake said, though his voice betrayed his doubt. Megan slowed the car as they approached. It was identical, the same peeling paint, the same pickup truck parked outside. Even the waitress stood in the doorway, her vacant eyes fixed on them. "Keep driving," Lisa whispered. Megan pressed the accelerator, and the car sped past the diner. The group sat in tense silence, their unease growing with each passing mile. But as the hours dragged on, the same diner reappeared, over and over, each time exactly the same. In the distance, the diner's flickering neon sign came into view. The group fell silent as they realized it was the same diner they had stopped at earlier. "How is that possible?" Tyler asked. "We've been driving straight for hours." "Maybe it's a different one," Jake said, though his voice betrayed his doubt. Megan slowed the car as they approached. It was identical, the same peeling paint, the same pickup truck parked outside. Even the waitress stood in the doorway, her vacant eyes fixed on them. "Keep driving," Lisa whispered. Megan pressed the accelerator, and the car sped past the diner. The group sat in tense silence, their unease growing with each passing mile. But as the hours dragged on, the same diner reappeared, over and over, each time exactly the same. "This can't be happening," Megan said, her voice cracking. "We're stuck. We're trapped. Let's stop," Jake said suddenly. "Maybe we missed something. Maybe we need to. I don't know, talk to someone." "Are you insane?" Lisa snapped. "We're not going back in there. Do you have a better idea?" Jake shot back. Before they could argue further, the car began to sputter. Megan swore under her breath as the engine died, leaving them stranded in the middle of the highway. The silence was deafening. "What now?" Tyler asked. No one answered. The diner's neon sign appeared in the distance once more, its glow cutting through the darkness like a beacon. But this time, something was different. Figures were emerging from the diner, the waitress, joined by others, all walking toward the car. Their movements were slow but purposeful, their faces blank and expressionless. "We have to run," Lisa said, her voice trembling. Run where? Jake asked. There's nowhere to go. The figures drew closer, their footsteps echoing in the still night. Megan locked the doors, her hands shaking. The group huddled together, their breaths shallow as the figures surrounded the car, their faces pressed against the windows. And then, the lights went out. When the group awoke, they were back on the highway, the SUV parked on the shoulder. The sun was rising, casting the landscape in warm, golden light. There was no sign of the diner, no sign of the figures. What happened? Tyler asked, rubbing his temples. I don't know, Megan said, her voice hollow. The GPS was working again, showing their location just a few miles from the cabin. They drove in silence, each of them haunted by the memories of the endless highway. But as they approached the cabin, they noticed something strange. Parked in the driveway was a weathered pickup truck, identical to the one they'd seen at the diner. And on the front porch stood the waitress, her vacant eyes watching them as they arrived. It was supposed to be a carefree road trip, a chance for four friends to escape the monotony of daily life. Megan, Tyler, Lisa, and Jake packed their SUV with snacks, drinks, and an enthusiastic playlist for a long drive to a lakeside cabin. The trip promised nothing but laughter, breathtaking views, and nights under the stars. None of them could have anticipated the nightmare awaiting them. They merged onto Route 95 just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Megan drove with quiet focus, Lisa navigated with her phone, and Tyler and Jake argued over music choices in the back seat. The map says it's a 5-hour drive, Lisa announced, tilting her phone. Mostly straight, so no way we can get lost. Famous last words, Jake muttered, scrolling through their playlist. How about we skip to the good songs? We're not skipping anything, Tyler argued. Road trips are about the journey. They laughed as they drove deeper into the wilderness. Mile markers passed in steady rhythm, and the headlights of their SUV illuminated a road devoid of other cars. They were alone, or so they thought. Around 10 p.m., the first signs of trouble began. The GPS screen flickered, then went dark. What the hell? Megan said, tapping the screen. It's probably just a glitch, Lisa said, reopening the Maps app on her phone. But her signal was gone. No service, she muttered. We'll just follow the road. The group pressed on, but the longer they drove, the more unsettled they became. The road stretched endlessly ahead, lined by dense trees on either side. The occasional roadside signs were faded and illegible, and there were no towns or rest stops in sight. How far now? Jake asked, stifling a yawn. It's been saying 2 hours for the last 40 minutes, Lisa replied, frowning at her phone. Something's off. Probably just a bad signal, Megan said, though her grip on the wheel tightened. We'll stop at the first gas station we see. An hour later, a dimly lit gas station appeared on the horizon. Its fluorescent lights buzzed against the dark sky, and a single attendant stood behind the counter inside. A rusted pickup truck was parked at the side. Finally, Tyler said as Megan pulled into the lot. Let's stretch our legs. They stepped out, the chill night air biting at their skin. Inside the gas station, the shelves were sparsely stocked, and the attendant barely acknowledged them. His face was pale, his eyes sunken, and he spoke in a voice that barely rose above a whisper. Where's the nearest town? Megan asked, trying to sound casual. The attendant didn't look up. Just keep driving, he muttered. Helpful, Jake quipped. He grabbed a pack of chips, but when he went to pay, the card reader beeped in protest. Cash only, the attendant said, his eyes darting nervously to the windows. As they returned to the car, Megan hesitated. Did anyone else notice how weird he was? He's probably just bored, Tyler said. Not like there's much action around here. Let's just go, Lisa said, glancing back at the gas station. The attendant was still watching them, his face illuminated by the flickering lights. Back on the road, the atmosphere in the car was tense. The forest seemed to close in around them, the trees pressing closer with each passing mile. The night grew darker, and the road seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. "We've been driving for hours," Megan said, her voice tight. "Where's the turnoff? Are we—" Lisa hesitated. "Are we sure we're on the right road?" Before anyone could answer, a faint glow appeared in the distance. As they approached, their stomachs dropped. It was the gas station. "No way," Jake said. "We haven't turned around." Megan slowed the car as they passed. The same rusted trucks sat in the same spot. The same attendant stood inside, watching them with unblinking eyes. "We must be going in circles," Megan said, her voice cracking. "But we haven't made any turns," Tyler pointed out. "How is that possible?" The group drove on, trying to shake the growing sense of dread. But an hour later, the gas station reappeared. "That's it," Megan said, pulling over. "We need to figure this out." As they debated, a shadow moved across the forest. Tyler was the first to notice. "Did you see that?" he whispered, pointing toward the trees. "See what?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall and thin, its face obscured by darkness. As it stepped closer, the group realized it wasn't alone. More figures appeared, their movements slow and deliberate. "Get in the car," Megan hissed. They scrambled inside, locking the doors. Megan hit the gas, and the SUV sped down the road. But the figures didn't disappear. They stood in the road behind them, their forms illuminated by the taillights. The gas station appeared again, this time accompanied by the figures. They stood in the parking lot, their heads tilted unnaturally. The attendant was gone. "We're trapped," Lisa whispered. "This road isn't real." "What does that even mean?" Jake snapped. "It's a road. It has to lead somewhere." But deep down, they all knew she was right. The highway stretched into infinity, looping endlessly. The figures were closing in, their faces devoid of features, their steps synchronized. The group tried everything, turning around, taking the forest path, even abandoning the car. But no matter what they did, they always ended up back at the gas station. Their supplies dwindled, and their sanity began to unravel. The figures grew bolder, tapping on the windows at night, whispering words they couldn't understand. By the time the sun rose, the group was too exhausted to continue. When rescue workers found the SUV days later, it was empty. The vehicle was parked by the side of Route 95, its interior coated in dust. There was no sign of Megan, Tyler, Lisa, or Jake. Locals whispered about the road, a cursed stretch where travelers vanished without a trace. They called it the Endless Highway. No one who entered ever made it out. The gas station attendant, they said, had been dead for years.